Some figures do not belong entirely to one domain. They are not purely rulers, not purely mortals, not purely creators, and not purely observers. They stand in between. They move across boundaries that others remain confined within. They translate what is hidden. They carry messages from one layer of reality into another. These are the bridge figures. In Greek tradition, this role is embodied most clearly by Hermes. In symbolic and theological readings, a similar mediating role can be seen in Jesus, not as a direct equivalent, but as a figure whose significance rests in connection, transmission, and the crossing of boundaries. These figures represent translation of knowledge, movement between realms, communication of truth. They are not bound to one layer of reality. This is what makes them different from the archetypes that came before. Authority governs structure, but remains within the logic of order. Humanity lives within the system, but does not transcend it. Knowledge disrupts the system, but does not necessarily reconcile its divisions. Collapse resets the world, and renewal restarts it, but neither explains how meaning travels across layers. The bridge does. The bridge archetype appears when separation has already been established. By this point in the cycle, reality has been divided into categories: divine and human, order and chaos, seen and unseen, innocence and awareness, life and transformation. These divisions create tension. They make experience possible, but they also produce distance. Something must move between these distances. Something must carry understanding from one side to another. This is where Hermes becomes essential. Hermes is not simply a messenger in the ordinary sense. He is not just someone who delivers information from one point to another. He is the archetype of mediation itself. He crosses thresholds. He moves between gods and mortals, between the living and the dead, between order and movement. He is associated with roads, trade, speech, cunning, interpretation, and travel, not because these things are random, but because they all involve passage. He is the figure of transition. He does not belong to a single fixed place because his role is to connect places that would otherwise remain isolated. He translates not only words but meaning. He enables movement not only across physical space, but across symbolic and conceptual boundaries. This is why the bridge archetype is so important. Without it, truth remains inaccessible. Without it, knowledge remains fragmented. Without it, systems remain closed. The bridge opens what structure closes. It does not destroy order. It makes order permeable. This same symbolic function can be applied in a very different context to Jesus as mediator. Again, this is not a claim that Hermes and Jesus are the same figure. Their stories, theological roles, and meanings differ deeply. But in the archetypal structure being built here, both occupy a bridging position. Jesus, in symbolic terms, represents the crossing point between divine truth and human experience. He stands at the threshold between realms, bringing teaching into history, spirit into flesh, transcendence into suffering. His significance is not only in what he says, but in what he connects. He joins what had been separated, the divine and the human, truth and embodiment, suffering and transformation. This is why the bridge figure often carries a paradoxical quality. It belongs to both sides, yet fully to neither. It speaks in one realm but is understood in another. It moves through structure without being confined to it. That in-between quality is not weakness, it is function, because the bridge is not meant to dominate reality. It is meant to make movement through reality possible. This archetype appears in many forms beyond Hermes and Jesus. It can be seen in any figure that carries insight from one domain into another: scribes, prophets, messengers, intermediaries, guides. In some traditions, the bridge speaks through language. In others, through self-sacrifice. In others, through descent and return. But the pattern remains consistent. A boundary exists. A separation is established. A figure appears who can cross it. This crossing is never trivial. It changes both sides. Once truth is translated into human terms, humanity changes. Once knowledge moves from the hidden into the visible is altered. Once a message arrives, the recipient is no longer where they were before receiving it. This is why communication of truth is not merely informational, it is transformational. To communicate truth across realms is to alter the structure of experience itself. That is what makes the bridge archetype so powerful. It does not simply carry facts, it carries access. It creates the possibility that what was once unreachable can now be approached, interpreted, and lived. This also explains why bridge figures are often linked with danger or tension. Hermes is associated not only with communication, but with ambiguity, speed, and trickery. Messages can clarify, but they can also disrupt. Translation can reveal truth, but it can also destabilize what had been assumed. A bridge does not merely connect, it also exposes the fact that separation was never absolute. This can be liberating, but it can also be unsettling. Because once movement between realms becomes possible, old boundaries lose some of their certainty. The bridge introduces fluidity into systems built on division. It allows the mortal to glimpse what had seemed inaccessible. It allows the structured world to be interrupted by meaning from beyond itself. And once that happens, the cycle shifts again. Because connection is never the final stage. Once truth has been carried across, it must be received. Once movement between realms is possible, those realms cannot remain unchanged. Once communication opens the boundary, transformation follows. The bridge does not end the cycle. It prepares the way for the next phase, a phase in which what has been transmitted is no longer merely understood from a distance, but absorbed, lived, and embodied. That phase is transformation.